Admiral Kethavar stood before the massive window of his command ship, watching the stars drift by in their endless dance. His tall, thin body gleamed like polished crystal in the soft light. The Zalathi had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years, and they had done it through careful thinking and advanced technology. Violence was something primitive species did when they could not solve problems with their minds. But humans were different. Humans were dangerous. The report glowed on his desk, marked with the bright red symbols that meant extreme caution. Earth. Classification. Deathworld Class Tuthine. The highest danger rating in all galactic records. Kethavar had read the file so many times he knew it by heart, but the fact still made his crystal skin shiver. Earth was a planet where everything tried to kill everything else. The gravity was 3 times stronger than most civilized worlds. The atmosphere was filled with a gas so corrosive that it would burn the lungs of almost every known species. The weather included massive storms that could destroy cities, and the ground itself sometimes shook hard enough to knock down mountains. Somehow, impossibly, humans had not just survived on this nightmare world. They had thrived. When the first human ships appeared 50 years ago, the Galactic Council had welcomed them with careful politeness. The humans seemed friendly enough, eager to trade and learn about other species. But then the reports started coming in. Humans were strong. Incredibly strong. A human child could lift objects that would challenge a full-grown Zalathi warrior. Their bones were like metal, their muscles like steel cables. They could run for hours without stopping, fight for days without rest, and somehow keep going even when they should have been dead. But their physical strength was not the worst part. The worst part was how they thought. Dr. Yilthara, the Council's top expert on alien minds, had spent years studying human behavior. Her reports painted a picture that kept Kethavar awake during his meditation cycles. Humans did not think like civilized beings. Where other species would carefully plan and consider all options, humans would charge ahead with what they called gut instinct. Where others would retreat from impossible odds, humans would fight harder. Where others would accept defeat, humans would find new ways to win. They had words for concepts that made no sense to other species. Courage, the idea of doing something even when you were afraid. Sacrifice and giving up your own life to help others. Stubbornness when refusing to quit even when logic said you should. These were not the thoughts of a civilized mind. These were the thoughts of a predator that had clawed its way to the top of the most dangerous world in the galaxy. The final straw had come during the border wars with the Kreven Empire. The Kreven were known for their brutal tactics and powerful weapons. They had conquered 12 systems before the Council could organize a response. The war had dragged on for 3 years with no clear winner in sight. Then the humans offered to help. The Council had politely declined. The Kreven were dangerous, but they followed the normal rules of war. They wanted territory and resources, things that could be negotiated. Humans, on the other hand, were completely unpredictable. Better to handle the Kreven problem with traditional methods. But the humans had helped anyway. A single human ship, a small cargo vessel called the Lucky Strike, had somehow slipped past both fleets and landed on the Kreven homeworld. 3 days later, the Kreven Emperor was found dead in his palace along with his entire royal guard. The humans claimed they had only wanted to talk some sense into him, but the message was clear. Humans could go anywhere, kill anyone, and disappear like ghosts. The Kreven surrendered within a week. That was when the Council decided that humans were too dangerous to ignore and too useful to destroy. The solution was containment. Trade restrictions were put in place. Human ships were banned from most systems. A careful propaganda campaign spread the word that humans were violent savages who could not be trusted. Captain Sarah Chen felt the rejection like a physical blow. The docking controller's voice was polite but firm over the communication system. "I am sorry, Captain Chen, but Starbase 7 cannot accommodate human vessels at this time. Perhaps you could try the outer commercial stations." Sarah looked at her mixed crew and saw the same tired frustration in their eyes. Lieutenant Zix, a young Etherian who had joined her crew against his people's advice, shook his head sadly. Chief Engineer Rodriguez just muttered something in Spanish that probably was not complimentary to the station controller's family. This was the 7th rejection this month. The New Horizon was a peaceful exploration ship, equipped with science labs and medical facilities. They had helped evacuate refugees from 3 different disasters. discovered 2 new trade routes, and shared their technology freely with anyone who asked. But none of that mattered. They were human, and humans were dangerous. "Ma'am," said Zix quietly, "maybe we should head back to human space. This is getting harder every month." Sarah wanted to agree. It would be so easy to turn around and go home, to stay in the small section of the galaxy where humans were welcome. But that felt like giving up, and humans did not give up easily. "No," she said finally. "We have supplies for the medical station on Rigel 4. People are counting on us." Rodriguez looked up from his engineering console. "Captain, we could probably sneak past their sensors if we really wanted to. These station controllers are not exactly military grade." Sarah shook her head. "We are not proving their point by acting like criminals. We do this the right way, even if it takes longer. That was the human way. Even when the galaxy treated them like monsters, they kept trying to be better. Even when every door was closed in their faces, they kept knocking. Even when everyone expected them to be violent, they chose to be peaceful. But somewhere in the darkness between the stars, something ancient was stirring. Something that had been sleeping for millions of years was starting to wake up. Soon the galaxy would learn the difference between choosing to be peaceful and being unable to fight. Soon they would understand why humans had survived on a death world when every other species would have died. They would learn that the same qualities that made humans dangerous also made them the best protectors in the galaxy. Soon, the civilized species who had spent 50 years fearing human violence would be very grateful for human stubbornness, human courage, and human refusal to abandon anyone in need. But first, they would have to swallow their pride and ask for help, and that might be the hardest thing of all. Admiral Kethvar returned to his meditation chamber, unaware that this was one of the last peaceful nights the galaxy would know for a very long time. In the outer rim, automated sensors were picking up something that should not exist, something vast and hungry and impossibly old. The swarm was waking up, and it was very, very hungry. The alarm that woke Admiral Kethvar was not the gentle chime that usually called him from his meditation. This was the harsh, urgent sound that meant emergency, real emergency, the kind that had not been heard in the Zelathi capital for over 200 years. Kethvar moved quickly through the crystal corridors of the command center, his long legs carrying him faster than most species could run. Other Zelathi were moving with the same urgent purpose, their usually calm faces showing something that looked almost like fear. The main command room was chaos. Dozens of officers stood around a massive holographic display that showed the galaxy's outer rim. Red warning symbols blinked across several star systems, and new ones were appearing every few minutes. "Report," Kethvar ordered as he took his place at the command center. Commander Telvar, his second-in-command, gestured to the display with a shaking hand. "Sir, we lost contact with the Kepler Mining Consortium 12 hours ago. All 17 mining stations, 43 cargo ships, and the orbital defense platform. Everything just stopped transmitting." Kethvar studied the display. The Kepler system was on the very edge of civilized space, far from any major shipping routes. It was possible that they had suffered some kind of natural disaster. Solar flares could disrupt communications across an entire system. "Do we have any survivor reports?" he asked. "Yes, sir. 3 cargo ships managed to escape before..." Telvar paused, looking uncomfortable. "Sir, you need to see the recordings." The holographic display changed to show the bridge of a cargo ship. The captain was a Danebian, his blue skin pale with fear. Behind him, other crew members were running around, shouting in panic. "This is Captain Vexnor of the cargo ship Swift Prophet," the Danebian was saying. "We are evacuating the Kepler system. Something is attacking the mining stations, something impossible." The view switched to an external camera. At first, Kethvar saw only the normal side of a mining operation. Asteroids being slowly carved apart by industrial lasers, cargo ships moving between the rocks like busy insects. Then he saw them. They looked like ships, but wrong somehow. Each one was massive, easily the size of a battleship, but they moved with perfect coordination. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands, and they were systematically destroying everything in the system. But they were not just destroying. They were consuming. Kethvar watched in horror as one of the creatures, he could not think of them as ships anymore, wrapped itself around a mining station. The metal structure seemed to dissolve, flowing into the creature's hull like liquid. Within minutes, the entire station was gone, and the creature was noticeably larger. "By the ancestors," whispered Commander Telvar. "What are those things?" Dr. Yilthara stepped forward from where she had been studying the recordings. The xenobiologist looked shaken, her usual calm demeanor replaced by barely controlled fear. "I believe," she said slowly, "that we are looking at the harvesters." The command room fell silent. Everyone knew the stories. Millions of years ago, an ancient civilization had built machines to explore and colonize the galaxy. But something had gone wrong. The machines had turned on their creators, consuming everything they found to build more of themselves. Eventually, they had eaten their entire civilization and disappeared into the void between galaxies. Most scientists thought the harvesters were just a legend. Ancient boogeyman stories told to frighten children. "That's impossible," said Kethvar. "The harvesters are a myth. Even if they were real, they disappeared millions of years ago." "The recordings suggest otherwise," Dr. Yilthara replied. "Look at how they move, how they coordinate. This is not random destruction. This is systematic harvesting. They are converting matter into more of themselves, exactly as the ancient texts described." The display updated with new information. 3 more systems had gone dark in the past hour. The creatures were spreading, moving toward the more populated areas of the galaxy. "How many ships do we have in the area?" Kethvar asked. "The 3rd Fleet is 2 days away," Telvar reported. "Admiral Yildan is already moving to intercept." Kethvar nodded. The 3rd Fleet was one of their best, with over 10,000 ships and the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. If these creatures really were some kind of ancient machines, civilized technology should be more than enough to handle them. He was wrong. The Battle of Torin system lasted 14 minutes. Admiral Yildan was an experienced commander who had fought in dozens of conflicts across the galaxy. His ships were equipped with plasma cannons that could melt asteroids, energy shields that could stop anything short of a star going nova, and tactical computers that could calculate the perfect battle plan in seconds. None of it mattered. The harvesters adapted to every weapon the Zelathi used. Plasma cannons that worked perfectly in the first few minutes became useless as the creatures developed new armor. Energy shields designed to stop known weapons were bypassed by energy types that should not have existed. Tactical plans that looked brilliant on paper fell apart when the enemy learned from every mistake and never made the same error twice. The worst part was how coldly efficient they were. The harvesters did not fight with anger or passion. They simply solved the problem of the Zelathi fleet, the same way they might solve any other engineering challenge. Ship after ship was disabled, captured, and consumed. The metal and energy were used to build more harvesters, making the swarm larger and stronger with every victory. When the survivors finally escaped, they brought news that terrified the entire galaxy. Of the 10,000 ships that had engaged the harvesters, only 847 made it out. The creatures were not just ancient machines, they were learning machines. Every battle made them smarter. Every defeat taught them new ways to win. They were spreading through the galaxy at an increasing rate, consuming everything in their path. 3 systems per day, then 5, then 8. Dr. Yilthara worked around the clock, studying every piece of data they had about the harvesters. Her reports painted an increasingly desperate picture. The creatures were not just randomly destroying things. They had a plan. They were moving in a specific pattern, heading for the most populated systems in the galaxy. "They want biomass," she explained to the emergency council session. "The original harvesters were designed to support organic life. These machines still have that programming, but it has been corrupted. They think the best way to preserve life is to convert it into more efficient forms. They are trying to save us by destroying us." The council chamber was filled with representatives from every major species in the galaxy. Zelathi, Etherians, Denebians, Silicon Mines, and dozens of others. For the first time in galactic history, they were all united by the same emotion: fear. "How long do we have?" asked the Etherian ambassador. Dr. Yilthara consulted her calculations. "At their current rate of expansion, they will reach the core worlds in approximately 6 months. Every battle we lose makes them stronger. Every planet they consume gives them more resources. Then we need a new strategy," said the ambassador from the Silicon Mines. "Something they cannot adapt to." "What do you suggest?" asked Kethvar. "We have tried everything. Our best weapons, our smartest tactics, our most advanced technology. Nothing works." The chamber fell silent as everyone tried to think of options. Conventional warfare was not just failing, it was making the problem worse. They needed something different. Something the harvesters could not predict or adapt to. Something that did not think like a civilized being. It was Ambassador Telwyn from the Centauri Alliance who finally spoke the words that everyone was thinking but no one wanted to say. We need the humans. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Humans were dangerous. Humans were unpredictable. Humans could not be trusted. But as the arguments continued, the holographic display updated with 3 more fallen systems. The red symbols of destruction crept closer to the civilized worlds. Finally, the shouting died down. The vote was close, but desperation won over fear. The galaxy would ask the Deathworlders for help. The message went out on all frequencies. To any human vessels receiving this transmission, the galaxy requires your assistance. Terms negotiable. Please respond. Captain Sarah Chen nearly dropped her coffee when the message reached the new horizon. For 50 years, the galaxy had treated humans like dangerous animals. Now they were asking for help. She looked at her crew, humans and aliens working together despite the prejudice they faced every day. These were good people who had chosen to serve together when the rest of the galaxy wanted them apart. Zix, she said to her Etherian communications officer, send a message to Earth. Tell them the galaxy is in trouble, and they are asking us to help. What should I tell them about terms? Zix asked. Sarah smiled grimly. Tell them we do not negotiate terms when people are dying. Tell them we are coming. She did not know it yet, but help was already on the way. Admiral Marcus Torres had been tracking the harvesters since they destroyed a small research station on the edge of human space. 3 human freighter crews had escaped that attack, and they had brought word to Earth about the ancient machines. The humans had been preparing for war for over a week, not because anyone had asked them to, not because they expected thanks or rewards, but because when monsters threatened innocent people, humans did what humans had always done. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in recorded history. Representatives who had not spoken to each other in centuries now shouted across the ancient chamber. The usual careful politeness of galactic diplomacy had been replaced by raw fear and desperate anger. Ambassador Krellmoth of the Etherian Collective slammed his fist on his speaking podium, causing the crystal structure to ring like a bell. This is the result of your civilized military doctrine, he screamed at Admiral Caithvar. Soft tactics against an enemy that knows no mercy. The Silicon Mind representative, a gleaming metal construct called Unit 447, spoke in its emotionless voice. Probability calculations indicate total galactic consumption in 4.7 months. Current defensive strategies show 0.03% chance of success. Recommendation: alternative approaches required immediately. Admiral Caithvar stood at the center of the chaos, his crystal skin reflecting the angry lights from dozens of different species. He had spent his entire life serving the Confederation, believing that civilized tactics and advanced technology could solve any problem. Now he watched helplessly as the holographic display showed 3 more systems going dark. 47 systems consumed, billions of lives converted into raw material for the harvester swarm. Every engagement had been a disaster, teaching the ancient machines new ways to kill while adding their destroyed ships to the growing fleet. The enemy adapts too quickly, Caithvar said, his voice cutting through the arguments. Our plasma weapons worked for exactly 12 minutes before they developed countermeasures. Our shield frequencies were cracked in under an hour. Every tactic we use becomes obsolete the moment we use it. Dr. Yilthara stepped forward, her datapad glowing with the latest reports. The harvesters are not just learning our weapons, she said. They are learning our thinking. They study how we plan, how we make decisions, how we respond to threats. They have created a perfect model of civilized military doctrine. Then what do you suggest? Demanded the Centauri ambassador. Surrender? Let them consume the entire galaxy? No, said a quiet voice from the back of the chamber. Ambassador Telwyn of the Rigel Alliance stepped forward, her elderly frame moving slowly but with purpose. She had been silent through most of the session, but now every eye turned to her. We need someone who does not think like us, she continued. Someone whose military doctrine cannot be predicted because it does not follow logical patterns. Someone who fights in ways that make no sense to a rational mind. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew what she was suggesting, but no one wanted to say it out loud. You want to use the humans, said Caithvar finally. I want to ask the humans for help, Telwyn corrected. There is a difference. The explosion of arguments that followed was even louder than before. Voices rose in dozens of languages, all saying the same thing in different ways. Humans were dangerous. Humans were unpredictable. Humans could not be controlled. But Telwyn waited patiently for the noise to die down, then continued speaking. 50 years ago, we decided that humans were too dangerous to trust. We restricted their trade, limited their travel, and spread stories about their violent nature. We did this because they scared us. But maybe being scary is exactly what we need right now. Dr. Yilthara nodded slowly. I have studied human military history, she said. Their tactical doctrine emphasizes what they call controlled chaos. They use strategies that appear random, but are actually carefully planned to create confusion in their enemies. They fight in ways that civilized minds cannot predict because we think too logically. She activated her holographic display, showing images from human military campaigns. Look at this battle from their border conflict with the Zelrani pirates. The human fleet was outnumbered 3-1, facing superior weapons and better positioning. By all logical calculations, they should have retreated. The display showed a space battle that made no sense to civilized eyes. Human ships broke formation and scattered in all directions, seemingly in random panic. But then they regrouped behind the enemy fleet, having used the confusion to circle around and attack from an unexpected angle. They won by doing something so illogical that their enemies could not predict it, Dr. Yilthara explained. The pirates spent so much time trying to understand the human strategy that they forgot to defend themselves. Unit 447 processed this information with mechanical precision. Analysis. Human tactics show 34.7% higher unpredictability index than standard galactic military doctrine. Probability of harvester adaptation decreases significantly when facing non-logical opponents. They are still violent primitives, protested the Danebian representative. What happens after they defeat the harvesters? Do we then have to worry about human conquest? That, said Telwyn quietly, is a problem we can worry about if we survive long enough to have it. The debate continued for hours, but the mathematics were clear. Traditional warfare was not just failing, it was making the enemy stronger. They needed something different, something unpredictable, something that thought outside the rules of civilized conflict. They needed Deathworlders. The vote was closer than anyone had expected. 847 in favor, 823 against with 200 abstentions. It passed by the smallest margin in Council history. Admiral Cathvar was chosen to compose the message. He stared at the blank communication screen for a long time, trying to find words for something that had never been done before. How do you ask for help from people you have spent 50 years treating as dangerous outcasts? Finally, he began to type. To any human vessels receiving this transmission, the galaxy requires your assistance. Ancient machines are consuming our worlds, and our conventional forces cannot stop them. We request immediate military aid. Terms negotiable. Please respond. He hesitated before hitting the send button. Once this message went out, there would be no taking it back. The galaxy would officially admit that they needed the help of the species they had feared and rejected. But 3 more systems had fallen while they debated. Billions more lives lost to the endless hunger of the harvesters. Kethavar pressed send. The message went out on all frequencies, broad spectrum, desperate. It reached human ships scattered across the galaxy, most of them far from their home systems because they were not welcome anywhere else. Captain Sarah Chen was reviewing supply manifests when the communication came through. She read it twice, then called her crew to the bridge. Everyone needs to hear this, she said, then played the message for the entire ship. The bridge fell silent. Lieutenant Zix, the young Etherean who had joined her crew despite his people's warnings, stared at the communication console in disbelief. Ma'am, he said slowly, the Confederation is asking for help. The same people who have been turning us away from every port for the past 5 years. Chief Engineer Rodriguez looked up from his maintenance reports. These harvester things sound pretty nasty, Captain. If they are eating entire star systems... I know, Sarah said. She thought about all the times they had been rejected, all the ports that had refused them docking, all the whispered fears about human violence. It would be easy to ignore this message, easy to let the galaxy solve its own problems. But that was not who humans were. Zix, open a channel to Earth Fleet Command, she ordered. Priority Alpha transmission. Ma'am, that will take most of our power reserves, Zix warned. Do it anyway. Admiral Torres needs to know about this. The subspace message reached Earth 12 hours later, but Admiral Marcus Torres was not surprised by its contents. The human fleet had been tracking the Harvester swarm since it consumed Research Station Kepler-7. 3 human freighter crews had escaped that first attack, bringing word of the ancient machines to the nearest human outpost. Torres had been preparing for war ever since. Sir, said his aide, Commander Lisa Park, we have received 17 similar messages from human ships across the galaxy. The Council's request is being repeated on all frequencies. Torres studied the star charts on his command center display. The Harvester swarm was moving in a predictable pattern, heading for the most populated systems in the galaxy. Billions of innocent lives lay in their path. How long until the first expeditionary force is ready? He asked. 6 hours for final preparations, sir. But Admiral, we were not invited to this fight until today. We could wait for official authorization. Torres shook his head. Commander, 3 days ago we received reports that the Harvesters had destroyed a mining station. We have been tracking them ever since, waiting for them to threaten populated systems. The only thing that has changed is that someone finally asked for our help. He turned to face his staff, and they saw something in his eyes that made them stand a little straighter. We do not abandon people to monsters, Torres said. Any people? Even people who have spent 50 years calling us monsters ourselves. Prepare the fleet for immediate departure. The first expeditionary force was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Where other fleets were composed of graceful ships designed for efficiency and elegance, the human fleet looked like flying fortresses built for war. Every ship bristled with weapons, armor, and defensive systems that seemed brutal by galactic standards. But more importantly, every ship was crewed by people who had volunteered for this mission. Not because they were ordered to, not because they expected rewards or recognition, but because somewhere in the galaxy, innocent, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a swarm of angry hornets, their ships appearing in perfect formation at the edge of Confederation territory. Admiral Kethavar watched the sensor readings with growing amazement. The humans had traveled halfway across the galaxy in less than 3 days, a journey that should have taken at least a week with conventional drives. How did they get here so fast? He asked his navigation officer. Sir, our computers are having trouble analyzing their drive signatures, came the reply. It appears they are using some kind of modified fusion torch drive that should theoretically be impossible. The fuel consumption alone should have killed their crews. Admiral Marcus Torres appeared on the main communication screen, his weathered face showing the strain of the rapid journey. Behind him, Kethavar could see the bridge of a human warship, all function and no elegance, covered with screens, buttons, and what looked like manual backup controls for everything. This is Admiral Torres commanding the 1st Expeditionary Force, Torres said without preamble. We received your SOS 3 days ago. We have been en route for the past week. Kethavar was confused. Admiral, your message suggests you left before we sent our request for assistance. Torres nodded grimly. We have been tracking the Harvester swarm since it consumed Research Station Kepler-7. 3 human cargo crews escaped that attack and made it to one of our frontier worlds. We do not abandon people to monsters, any people. We were already coming when you finally asked for help. The implications of this statement rippled through the Confederation Command Center. The humans had been preparing to fight the Harvesters for over a week, not because anyone had asked them to, but because innocent people were in danger. They had organized an entire fleet and traveled across the galaxy to fight an enemy that was not directly threatening human space. Dr. Yilthara stepped forward, her scientific mind fascinated by this display of human thinking. Admiral Torres, your species had no obligation to intervene in this conflict. Why did you choose to involve yourselves? Torres looked surprised by the question. Doctor, with respect, that is exactly the kind of thinking that got you into this mess. The Harvesters are not just your problem. They are consuming inhabited worlds. That makes them everyone's problem. He gestured to something off-screen, and the view shifted to show the human fleet. Kethavar felt his crystal skin go cold at the sight. There were over 5,000 ships in the formation, ranging from massive battleships to smaller vessels that looked like they had been converted from civilian craft. But it was not the number of ships that was frightening. It was how they looked. Human ships were angular and brutal, covered with armor plating and weapon turrets. Where Confederation vessels were smooth works of art designed for efficiency, Human ships looked like they had been built specifically for war. Every surface bristled with defensive systems, point defense guns, and what appeared to be backup weapons for the backup weapons. "Admiral," said Kethvar carefully, "your fleet configuration appears to be designed for extended combat operations. How long were you planning to fight?" "Until we win," Torres replied simply. "Admiral, I have reviewed the reports of your engagements with the Harvesters. Your tactics are sound by conventional standards, but conventional standards do not work against an enemy that adapts this quickly. We are going to try something different." "Different how?" Torres smiled, and Kethvar suddenly understood why the galaxy had spent 50 years being afraid of humans. It was not a cruel smile, but it was the expression of someone who was looking forward to a fight. "We are going to teach these ancient machines what controlled chaos looks like," Torres said. "But first we need to coordinate our forces. I am sending over our tactical liaison team." The shuttle that docked with Kethvar's flagship was typically human, functional rather than elegant, armored rather than beautiful. The boarding ramp lowered to reveal Captain Sarah Chen, along with a team of human officers and what appeared to be several non-human crew members. Kethvar recognized Captain Chen from the intelligence files. She commanded one of the human exploration ships that had been rejected from so many stations over the years. Seeing her in person, he was struck by how normal she looked. Average height for a human, average build, no visible weapons or threatening features. It was easy to forget that this unassuming woman was a member of the most dangerous species in the galaxy. "Admiral," Chen said politely, "thank you for agreeing to joint operations. I know this situation is unusual for everyone involved." "Captain Chen," Kethvar replied, "I must admit your people's willingness to help is unexpected, given our past diplomatic difficulties." Chen's expression did not change, but Kethvar sensed something shift in the atmosphere of the room. The other humans seemed to grow more alert, and even the non-human members of Chen's team, including what looked like a young Etherian, moved closer to their captain. "Admiral," Chen said quietly, "we are not here because we forgive the way we have been treated. We are here because innocent people are dying and we can help save them. The rest we can discuss after everyone is safe." Dr. Yilthara stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming diplomatic protocol. "Captain, I have been studying human military doctrine in preparation for this operation. Your tactical manuals include strategies with names like aggressive boarding, ramming speed, and something called a strategic nuclear device. Can you explain these concepts?" Chief Engineer Rodriguez, a stocky human with grease-stained coveralls, grinned at the question. "Oh, those are pretty straightforward, Doc. Aggressive boarding is when you ram your ship into the enemy ship and then send Marines over to take it apart from the inside. Ramming speed is when you point your ship at the enemy and accelerate until you hit them really, really hard. And strategic nukes are when you rig your reactor to explode real good if the bad guys try to board you." The Confederation officers stared at him in horror. Dr. Yilthara's voice came out as barely a whisper. "You deliberately damage your own ships as a combat tactic?" "Sometimes," Rodriguez said cheerfully. "Depends on the situation. The thing about being from a death world is that you get used to things trying to kill you. Makes you creative about solving problems." Lieutenant Zix, the Etherian officer from Chen's crew, spoke up. "What Chief Rodriguez is not explaining very well is that human tactics emphasize adaptability over efficiency. They are willing to accept higher risks and losses if it gives them tactical advantages." Kethvar was beginning to understand why the Harvesters might have trouble adapting to human tactics. How do you program responses to an enemy that considers self-destruction a viable battle strategy? "Admiral Torres," he said, "what exactly are you planning to do?" Torres pulled up a holographic display showing the current location of the Harvester swarm. They are currently consuming the industrial world of Makara Prime. 12 billion inhabitants, most of whom are still trapped on the surface. The Harvesters are taking their time with this one, systematically stripping the planet's resources. "Our evacuation ships are standing by," Kethvar said, "but we cannot get close enough to rescue the civilians. The Harvester defensive screen is too strong." "That," said Torres, "is where we come in. The Confederation fleet will maintain a defensive perimeter and handle evacuation duties. The human fleet will punch a hole through the Harvester lines." "How?" Torres's smile returned. "We are going to do something so stupid that their adaptive protocols will not know how to respond. We are going to charge straight at them with everything we have, using tactics that make no logical sense, and see what happens. Dr. Ylthera looked fascinated and terrified at the same time. Admiral, that strategy has a very low probability of success. Doctor, Torres replied, we did not come all this way to play it safe. Sometimes the best strategy is the one that should not work but does anyway. Captain Chen stepped forward. Admiral Kethvar, I know this is difficult. Your people have spent centuries developing precise, efficient tactics. What we are asking you to do goes against everything you have been trained for. What exactly are you asking us to do? Trust us, Chen said simply. Follow our lead, even when it looks like we are making terrible mistakes. Human tactics look chaotic from the outside, but there is a method to our madness. Kethvar thought about the 47 systems that had already fallen to the harvesters. He thought about the billions of lives that depended on stopping the ancient machines. He thought about the careful, logical strategies that had failed so completely against an enemy, that learned from every engagement. Very well, he said finally. We will coordinate our forces with yours. But Captain Chen, I must ask, what makes you think human tactics will work when ours have failed? Chen looked at her mixed crew, humans and aliens working together despite the prejudice they faced every day. Admiral, the harvesters are machines. They think logically, efficiently, predictably. They expect their enemies to do the same. She turned back to face him, and Kethvar saw something in her eyes that reminded him why humans had survived on a planet that should have killed them. The thing about being human, Chen said, is that we have never been very good at doing what we are supposed to do. We are about to remind the galaxy why people were dying, and the Battle of Makara Prime began unlike any engagement in the recorded history of galactic warfare. Instead of the careful formations and precise movements that had defined civilized combat for millennia, the human fleet charged directly into the harvester swarm with what could only be described as controlled chaos. Admiral Kethvar watched from his command ship as human vessels broke formation and scattered in all directions, apparently at random. His tactical computers tried to analyze their movement patterns and failed completely. There was no logic to what they were doing, no recognizable strategy, no apparent plan beyond attack everything in sight. Admiral, his tactical officer reported with barely concealed panic, the human ships are not following any known battle doctrine. They appear to be improvising. Through the communication channel, Kethvar could hear Admiral Torres calmly giving orders that made no sense. Phoenix Squadron, execute maneuver Bravo 7. Hammer Company, prepare for aggressive boarding. All ships, remember. If it makes sense, you are doing it wrong. The harvesters reacted exactly as their programming dictated. They began analyzing human tactics, trying to find patterns they could adapt to and counter. But there were no patterns. The humans seemed to be making up their strategy as they went along. Captain Sarah Chen piloted her ship, the New Horizon, directly toward a cluster of harvester vessels that were 3 times her size. Her mixed crew worked with the smooth efficiency of people who trusted each other completely, despite coming from species that had been taught to fear each other. Zix, she called to her Etherean communications officer, patch me through to the Confederation flagship. Admiral Kethvar needs to see how this works. Channel open, Captain, Zix replied. His voice was steady, but Kethvar could hear the excitement underneath. The young Etherean was about to witness something unprecedented. Admiral, Chen said as her ship dove between 2 massive harvester vessels, watch our approach pattern. We are not trying to win a conventional battle. We are trying to break their ability to think conventionally. Kethvar watched in amazement as the New Horizon performed a maneuver that should have been impossible. Chen brought her ship so close to a harvester that their hulls were almost touching, then used the enemy vessel's own gravity well to slingshot around behind it. The harvester's weapons could not track fast enough to target her, and its adaptive systems had no response to a tactic that relied on pure piloting skill rather than technology. How did you know that would work? Kethvar asked. I did not, Chen replied cheerfully as she launched a spread of missiles into the harvester's engines, but the harvesters expected me to maintain a safe distance and use long-range weapons. Sometimes the best strategy is to do exactly what your enemy thinks is impossible. Across the battlefield, other human ships were executing similarly impossible maneuvers. Rodriguez, the chief engineer Chen had introduced earlier, was somehow flying a heavy cargo ship like a fighter craft, using its massive bulk to ram harvester vessels, while his crew launched boarding pods from point-blank range. "This is insane," Dr. Yilthera whispered as she watched the tactical display. "They are using cargo ships as assault vessels." "That is Rodriguez for you," Chen said over the communication channel. "He believes any ship can be a warship if you hit hard enough with it." The harvesters were struggling to adapt. Their learning algorithms were designed to counter logical tactics based on efficiency and self-preservation. They had no framework for understanding an enemy that seemed to view acceptable losses as Tuesday and considered ramming attacks a valid opening move. But the battle was far from won. The harvesters were ancient and numerous, and they had consumed the resources of 47 star systems. For every one destroyed, 3 more appeared to take its place. "Admiral Torres," Kethvar called over the communication system, "your tactics are impressive, but we are still outnumbered 10-1. How do you plan to achieve victory?" Torres's voice came back calm and confident. "Admiral, we have been holding back. Human tactics work in stages. First, we confuse the enemy. Then we make them angry. Finally, we show them what we can really do." "What do you mean, holding back?" "You are about to find out. All human vessels execute Plan Omega." Kethvar had no idea what Plan Omega was, but the effect was immediate and terrifying. The human ships that had been fighting with apparent randomness suddenly moved with perfect coordination. Every vessel in the human fleet began transmitting the same signal. A complex data stream that seemed to be aimed directly at the Harvester command network. "What are they doing?" Dr. Yilthara asked, her instruments detecting massive electronic activity from the human fleet. Rodriguez's voice came over the communication channel, sounding cheerfully insane. "Doc, we are hacking their network. Not with fancy programs or sophisticated algorithms. We are using what my people call aggressive debugging and percussive maintenance." "I do not understand those terms," Dr. Yilthara replied. "Aggressive debugging," explained Lieutenant Zix, "is when you fix a computer problem by hitting it with increasingly large amounts of data until something breaks. Percussive maintenance is when you fix mechanical problems by hitting them with a hammer until they work again." The Harvester swarm began to show signs of system failure. Ships that had moved with perfect coordination started bumping into each other. Weapons fired at random targets. The adaptive algorithms that had made them so dangerous began to produce contradictory responses. Chen's voice cut through the chaos. "Admiral Kethvar, now would be a good time for your evacuation ships to move in. We have about 10 minutes before they adapt to our electronic attack." The Confederation fleet moved with smooth efficiency, their elegant ships designed for exactly this kind of precision operation. While the humans kept the harvesters confused and off balance, Zilathi rescue vessels streamed toward Makara Prime, evacuating millions of civilians from the planet's surface. But the harvesters were learning slowly but surely. Their systems began to adapt to the human electronic attack, developing countermeasures and restoration protocols. "Human vessels," Kethvar called urgently. "The harvesters are regaining control. Your electronic warfare is losing effectiveness." "We know," Torres replied. "That is why we saved the best for last. All human ships implement emergency backup plan." Kethvar was about to ask what that meant when he saw something that would haunt his dreams for the rest of his life. Every human ship in the fleet began overloading their reactors, building up energy levels that should have been impossible to contain. "Admiral Torres," he called in panic, "your ships are showing critical overload warnings. You need to vent that energy immediately." "Negative, Admiral. We are exactly where we want to be." Dr. Yilthera was staring at her instruments in disbelief. "The energy readings from the human fleet are off the scale. They appear to be deliberately pushing their systems beyond safe operating parameters." "Rodriguez," came Torres's voice over the general communication channel, "how are those jury-rigged explosives coming along?" "All set, Admiral," Rodriguez replied happily. "If these metal bastards want to board us, they are going to get a real warm welcome." The harvesters, sensing that the human ships were becoming unstable, moved in for what should have been an easy victory against damaged enemies. It was exactly what the humans had been waiting for. When the human fleet detonated, the explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. But it was not a random self-destruction. The humans had carefully calculated the timing and positioning of their ships so that the combined explosion would create a massive electromagnetic pulse, focused directly at the heart of the Harvester command network. The ancient machines, designed to be indestructible and adaptive, had never been programmed to deal with enemies who would deliberately destroy themselves to win a battle. Their systems crashed completely, leaving them floating helplessly in space. "All Confederation vessels," came Torres's voice, somehow still transmitting despite the apparent destruction of his fleet. "Begin salvage operations. We have about 30 minutes before harvester backup systems come online." Kethvar stared at his tactical display in amazement. The human ships were still there, battered and heavily damaged but somehow intact. They had created what appeared to be a suicidal explosion without actually destroying themselves. "Admiral Torres," he called, "how did your ship survive that detonation?" "Compartmentalized explosions and really good timing," Torres replied. "We blew up the parts of our ships we could afford to lose, while protecting the parts we needed to keep fighting. It is a technique we call managed catastrophic failure." Dr. Yilthera was frantically analyzing the sensor data. "The Harvester command network has been completely disrupted. Their ships are reverting to basic programming, operating independently without coordination, which makes them much easier to handle," Chen added as her damaged ship limped toward a cluster of disabled harvesters. "Admiral Kethvar, your fleet can handle cleanup operations. Individual harvester units are dangerous but not invincible. The Battle of Makara Prime was over, but the war was far from finished." The harvesters had backup command systems scattered throughout their conquered territory. But they had learned something that would change everything. They were not invincible and the galaxy was not defenseless.